Welcome to another week of our Indie Dev Showcase here on the Game Wisdom channel, where each week I show off 6 of the many indie games we play from our Wednesday night streams. If you'd like to submit a game for a future stream and video, please get in touch. But the games you're going to see are either press key submissions, demos from festivals, or just an indie game that I play that I really wanted to talk about. And we're beginning with the Steam Festival demo for Cubia. This is a puzzle game where our key mechanic is that we are moving and kind of shifting the various blocks and make up the world in order to move around, find our collectibles, and solve each stage. So the puzzles again are designed around essentially linear elements, as you can only move these cubes in certain directions at certain angles, and as you can see by the borders, they lock where you can actually put them to. So a key element of the puzzle design is not only moving the cubes around, but as you turn them, you're changing what orientation the various sides are going to be, which is going to lead to more advanced puzzle solving and finding the bonus items. And the full version does promise there will be a level editor for anyone who wants to make their own devious style puzzles. My main concern I have with this one is that the puzzle solving is built on this primary element of just shifting the cubes around, and I don't know if there is going to be enough differing elements in the main game to kind of keep somebody motivated to play through all the way. The store page promises additional challenges and obstacles like lasers, as you may have saw right there, and I do like the general minimalistic aesthetic of it. And this could be a good one for puzzle fans to check out, although I am terrible when it comes to kind of keeping track of which face of the cube you're going to have to shift to and orient. It reminds me a little bit of when we played the last cube, which is even another mind-melting cube-based puzzle game. But if you are a fan of puzzle design, I would say keep an eye out for Cubia when it's released later this year. For our next game, we have Wildcat Gun Machine. This was a demo we played during the summer festival, and what this is essentially, let's combine Hades with Enter the Gungeon. And you can see that with kind of the isometric perspective, but focused on gunplay, as opposed to just running around with melee style weapons. Now, what's interesting about Wildcat is that the store page kind of gives me conflicting thoughts on what they want their full game to be. As you can see, the map is laid out very much like an action roguelike. A lot of corridors connecting to nondescript rooms, you move around, you kill, so on and so forth. But the story page defines itself as being more unique and handmade content as opposed to procedural. And I'm not quite sure where they're going to go with it in the full version. But the point of the game is you're going to explore, you're going to gain upgrades and new weapons, get modifiers and all that. Now, as you've been watching for the last 40 seconds or so, you may have noticed a red flag with the combat system of the game. And that is your starting weapon is kind of lackluster. It's the ubiquitous pea shooter style gun that we see that a lot of action-based roguelikes, the isometric shooters, essentially what they're trying to do is have your basic gun be very weak, so that there is a noticeable difference when you pick up a new weapon like you saw right there. But it reminds me a little bit of the issue that I had with Teleglitch from back in the day, that when your starting weapon is so ineffective, it just becomes like a punishment when you're just trying to kill normal enemies. Now, keep in mind the footage you're seeing is from over a year ago at this point, so there is a chance that things have been changed and upgraded since then. But I'm hoping that they make the basic gunplay feel better. Now, another problem I have with the game is that because of how nondescript the world is, it feels very generic. And I hope that they do more to improve kind of exploration and either tie it more into the gameplay or just make the levels feel, I think, a little bit more lively than what they are right now. But as always, if you're a fan of action roguelikes, isometric shooters, and whatnot, you may find something interesting with Wildcat Gun Machine. For our next game, we have Fallen Angel. And this is a game that we originally tried the demo for. I had some concerns about it, and then we got the actual press key for it a few months later. This is kind of in the top-down style of something like Hyper Light Drifter, but with a more engaging and technical combat system. Kind of like a mashup of a Devil May Cry action game with a Souls-like structure. So we play as Lucifer, who is assaulting heaven to try and deal with the angels, and I think we have to fight God at the end of this game. So the structure of this one, as I said, is definitely more on the Souls-like design. The world is open, but there are specific areas that you cannot reach without either getting a specific upgrade, fighting a boss for a key, or finding something in the environment. And you are given mostly free reign to look around and see what you can find. And a big aspect of Fallen Angel is getting new upgrades, including new weapons, new passives, finding upgrades as you can see right here, and you have to decide when you get to these kinds of upgrade shrines which power that you want to take. And as with any action-based Souls-like, you're going to probably find a few bread and butter skills you want to make the most use of. And you're going to do that when you get to boss fights. And as with any action Souls-like game that we've seen, there are quite a few boss fights you're going to have to deal with in Fallen Angel. And the game does have a very wide selection of bosses in terms of unique patterns and how you're supposed to fight them. All this sounds really great, but I felt like something was off about the game as we played it. That combat either was too easy, with being able to use your heavier moves or specific attacks to stun lock or just quickly destroy enemies, or it became very frustrating when enemies could just seem to attack and there didn't seem to be a safe way to get in or avoid damage. And while I will say this, the game definitely improved from my impressions from the Summer Festival demo to where it was at finish, but it still, I think, lacks all the parts working in harmony that we see from the better examples of Souls-likes. And too much of the game just feels like I'm just running around trying to figure out where I'm supposed to go, and the major upgrades that you find come few and far between. And while you can certainly buy new items at the various shops, and that's kind of where your experience / souls come in, a lot of the time it just feels better to avoid most fights, especially if you don't have easy ways of healing. And the combat was serviceable, but it still felt like I really wasn't able to cut loose in the same way as a Devil May Cry game, which, considering how active your character is supposed to be when moving around, you kind of want that really solid feel to it. And the part where I kind of stopped playing the game was probably a good 2 hours in, and it just felt like I was just wandering around, fight some very annoying enemy, die, return to the previous checkpoint, and I still don't even know where I should be going or what my actual goal is. And the level design definitely falls in the kind of the opposite of what we want from a good Souls-like, where it's a very wide, very nondescript area, as opposed to kind of the more obstacle course, very uniquely designed structure that we see from the Dark Souls games. Ultimately, I didn't hate Fallen Angel, but I kind of ran out of motivation to keep playing it. In kind of the opposite of what I saw from games like Ender Lilies, that kind of very Lovecraftian Dark Souls game that we played, I think, earlier in 2021. So, if you are looking for more of a faster paced Souls-like, I would say definitely give Fallen Angel a check. But just keep in mind that if you're hoping for kind of the high end of the genre, I don't think it hits that mark. But with that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we have 3 more games to look at. And as always, if you're interested in my thoughts on design, then check out these books. For entry-level students, we have 20 essential games to study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with horror coming by the end of 2021. We now turn to Yestermorrow, and this was played as a press key. And this is an action platformer, kind of very loose or very light Metroidvania aspects to it. And what we have here is a game that I really like the story of it. That takes place in a world where basically the bad guys win. It's very much more of a serious version of kind of what we saw with The Messenger, where you're able to switch between 2 different timelines. You have the post-apocalyptic nightmare future, and more of the happy, peaceful past, where you play as the younger version of our main character. So both versions are on a mission to try and save the past and revive the future. In the past, things are less dangerous, water is not toxic, and you're able to kind of explore more of it, while the future is full of creatures you don't have to dodge, fight, and just do your best to get around. And while I did enjoy the story, I found the gameplay, and this is what I like to say about a lot of games like this, it's essentially very non-threatening. Like, I don't see anything unique to this game, and while I wouldn't call it a bad game, it kind of lost my attention as we played more of it on stream. There's a lot of collectibles and hidden things to find, but for the most part, you are moving through this world very linearly, going from one point of interest or story beat to the next. And unlike The Messenger or other games that kind of make use of, multiple time periods, nothing is really changing from a mechanical standpoint when you're switching from past to future. Your character still behaves usually or mostly the same way, and maybe you do unlock special powers as the game goes on, but we played this all the way to kind of like the first true boss fight, and it really didn't seem like anything was changing along those lines. Like I said, I found the overall world and aesthetics to be charming, but this is one of those games where I just didn't see enough, like, in kind of the whole of Metroidvanias or 2D platformers that we played, that made me want to stick through it all the way to the end. But for those of you watching, if you are looking for another action platformer with a more mature storyline, but not, overly dark, then I would say give Yestermorrow a try and see where it goes with it. But as with a lot of games like this, if you're hoping for something that's going to move the needle or do something, extraordinary, then I don't think the game quite hits that mark. Now up, we turn to Night Dice. This was a game that we did get a press key to check out, and it's essentially what if Slay the Spire meets Dungeon Dice Monsters from the old Yu-Gi-Oh cartoon. Our concept here is that all combat and abilities are based on dice. Each turn, you roll your dice, and whatever symbols that you get will determine what your options are going to be. If you get specific combos of patterns that you saw on the bottom right, you can then make use of special attacks. As the path goes on, you can choose different upgrades, which will then let you modify your different dice, which in turn gives you a greater chance of getting specific patterns or specific things to show up. And as the game goes on, you'll fight stronger enemies. You'll need to make use of all the upgraded dice size that you're going to get in order to be able to stand a chance. And you can also get more dice, which means more size to customize. And there's a very good, I think, core gameplay loop to Knight dice. My problem, and I think what kind of hurts this game the most, is that from what I played of the finished build, it feels more like a prototype or a proof of concept. There's no additional elements to this game. There's no progressive difficulty. There's no variance in terms of what you're doing on each run. It's kept very basic. And in a world that has titles like Monster Train, Slay the Spire, and the many other varieties of roguelikes out there, I feel Knight Dice just doesn't quite get there in terms of being an experience that you would want to play as opposed to those other games. If you're looking for a far shortened and less technical or complex experience compared to some of the other action roguelikes or deck building roguelikes we've seen, you can definitely try Knight Dice, but I feel like there's just more involving examples of games that have similar loops to it that are available. For our last game for this week's Spotlight, this is the demo build we played of Fabular, Once Upon a Spacetime, and this is one that I really enjoyed. So our concept is that this is the far future meets the Middle Ages meets folk tales. We played the prince of the king of a space empire, and we have been sent on a mission to try and save the kingdom. And to do that, we are going to have to get into spaceship sword fights with pirates and other things out in the mysterious universe. And yes, if space-based sword fighting sounds up your alley, I think you're going to enjoy this game right from the get-go. But our main gameplay here is very similar to kind of the exploration or node-based structure of FTL or Slay the Spire, where each map you choose where you explore based on the various nodes. And of course you'll find points of interest, random events, and you'll need to manage your resources and how you upgrade your ship if you want to have any chance of surviving. Your ultimate goal is to get to the end of each map, fight the big scary boss, move on to the next one. And as the game goes on, you'll find different weapons, different modifiers, cargo, and you'll be able to change how your ship responds. Now, the big thing about combat is that because we are floating in space with kind of simulated physics, it can be a little floaty, as you can see, to try and get attacks going. And this is one of those games, kind of like FTL, where you're going to win until you don't. And if you run into a boss or an enemy that just has like the perfect combination of weapons or defenses that you can't get around, good luck surviving that without just taking massive damage. But even with that said though, Fabular definitely has some potential. And if you are looking for another action roguelike, but this time with more of a spaceship twist as opposed to, ground-based or even some of the games we've seen on this week's Spotlight, then I would say definitely keep an eye out for this one, because I was really impressed with what I saw, even though we did get killed during our run of it. But with that said, we're going to wrap up this week's Indie Showcase here. I'd like to thank all developers who submitted games. You will find links to all the titles in the notes down below. And as always, if you would like to submit a game, please get in touch, as we're always looking for titles to look at, as well as Steam store pages to review for our Thursday show Indie Inquiries. As always, check out our Discord and Patreon link down below, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.